There is a truth about narcissists that almost no one sees. Once you understand it, you will never look at their behavior the same way again. Behind the confidence that seems impossible to shake, behind the charm that appears effortless, and behind the sense of superiority that overwhelms everyone around them, there is a quiet form of suffering that never fully goes away. Most people believe narcissists are happy with themselves. They assume narcissists enjoy the pain they cause. They think these individuals move through life feeling satisfied, untouched by guilt, untouched by emptiness, and untouched by the fears that affect ordinary people. But the deeper psychological reality is far more complicated. The narcissist is not the untouchable person they appear to be. In many ways, they are among the most emotionally troubled people you will ever meet. Their suffering is hidden so well that even the people closest to them often fail to recognize it. What you are about to understand will reveal the inner world of the narcissist in a way that very few people ever see. If you want to understand the human mind on a deeper level, if you want to recognize manipulation, understand hidden emotions, and uncover the psychological patterns that shape human behavior, stay with this journey. What comes next only makes sense when you are willing to look beneath the surface. And once you do, it becomes much harder to be fooled by appearances. The first sign of deep narcissistic suffering is almost invisible from the outside, yet it sits at the center of everything they do. It is a constant feeling of emptiness. From the outside, narcissists often appear full of self-confidence. They seem convinced of their own importance. They appear proud, self-assured, and completely satisfied with who they are. But inside, there is often a hollow space where a stable sense of self should exist. This emptiness is not something that comes and goes. It is not caused by a bad day or a difficult situation. It remains with them almost all the time. They feel it during moments of silence. They feel it when attention disappears. They feel it when nobody is watching. They feel it when no one is praising them or reflecting back the image they want the world to see. And because this emptiness feels unbearable, they spend much of their lives trying to fill it from the outside. They chase attention because, without it, they begin to feel invisible. They seek status because it temporarily distracts them from what they are feeling inside. They demand admiration because the moment it disappears, they are forced to face the emptiness they work so hard to avoid. This is one reason narcissists rarely find peace. Stillness becomes uncomfortable. Solitude feels like punishment. Quiet moments expose the very thing their grand image is designed to hide. You may notice that they constantly create noise around themselves. They fill silence with endless talking. They replace uncertainty with bold claims. They fill empty spaces with new goals, new conflicts, new relationships, and new audiences. What looks like constant activity is often a form of escape. The thing they are running from is the painful experience of being alone with themselves, without the mask, without the performance, and without the image they depend on. The second sign appears in something many people misunderstand completely. It is their constant dissatisfaction with everything they have. To outsiders, this often looks like ambition. It looks like someone with high standards. It looks like a person who refuses to settle for less. But underneath that appearance lies a different reality. Many narcissists struggle to experience lasting satisfaction. The moment they achieve something they wanted, the excitement quickly fades. The relationship that once seemed perfect suddenly becomes disappointing. The accomplishment that once felt important loses its meaning. The person they once admired begins to seem ordinary and flawed. This does not happen because life keeps letting them down. It happens because their inner world is unable to hold onto feelings of fulfillment for very long. True satisfaction requires a person to feel secure, grounded, and emotionally connected to themselves. The narcissist often lacks these foundations. As a result, they live in a constant state of wanting more attention, more success, more admiration, more proof that they matter. Yet, no matter how much they receive, it rarely feels like enough. This creates a painful form of psychological suffering. From the outside, it looks like motivation and ambition. On the inside, it feels like endless hunger. They achieve goals and feel empty. They enter relationships and feel empty. They collect accomplishments and still feel empty. Instead of looking inward to understand why this happens, they often blame the outside world. They convince themselves that the next achievement will finally satisfy them. The next relationship will finally make them happy. The next admirer will finally fill the void. But it never does, because the problem was never outside of them. The wound exists within. And no amount of external success can heal a wound that remains hidden from awareness. The third sign goes even deeper. It is something narcissists work very hard to conceal. It is the exhausting effort required to maintain a false self. Every narcissist creates an image. This image is stronger, smarter, more attractive, more successful, more important, and more special than they truly feel inside. This image is not simply a role they play from time to time. It becomes an entire psychological structure. And protecting that structure requires enormous energy. Imagine living every day as if you are performing on a stage. Imagine never feeling free to step out of character. Imagine carrying the fear that if people ever saw the real you, everything you built would collapse. This is the burden many narcissists carry. They constantly monitor how others see them. They pay close attention to impressions. They think about how they are being judged. They analyze conversations. They search for signs that their image is being questioned. They cannot allow themselves to be fully known because being fully known means being fully seen. And being fully seen means confronting parts of themselves they have spent years trying to avoid. This pressure creates exhaustion. It often appears as irritability. Sometimes it appears as sudden anger. Other times it appears as emotional withdrawal, cold behavior, or an intense need for control. Many people wonder why someone who appears powerful and confident can become so upset over a small criticism. The answer is deeper than it seems. They are not simply protecting their ego. They are protecting the structure that keeps them emotionally together. The narcissist is not arrogant because they genuinely feel superior. They are arrogant because feeling ordinary is unbearable. Their grandiosity is not a sign of healthy self-love. It is an attempt to compensate for a fragile sense of self that never fully developed. This is also why narcissistic injury can be so devastating. When someone points out their flaws, questions their image, or refuses to provide admiration, it does not feel like a minor problem. It feels like a direct threat to their existence. For the narcissist, the false self is not just a mask. It becomes the only identity they know how to live through. Threatening that identity feels like threatening the foundation of their entire world. That is why their reactions can seem extreme. That is why they may become explosive, defensive, or even cruel over situations that appear small to everyone else. What looks like overreaction is often an attempt to protect themselves from psychological collapse. If these ideas are helping you understand patterns you have seen in someone close to you, then continue paying attention. The more deeply you understand human behavior, the more clearly you can recognize manipulation, emotional confusion, and unhealthy patterns. Knowledge creates clarity, and clarity creates protection. The fourth sign of deep narcissistic suffering exists in a fear they rarely show, but constantly carry. It is the fear of becoming irrelevant. Beneath the confidence, beneath the grand image, and beneath the need to appear superior, there is often a powerful fear of being forgotten. They fear being overlooked. They fear being replaced. They fear becoming ordinary. For most people, the idea of being average may feel uncomfortable. But for the narcissist, it can feel unbearable. Because their identity depends on feeling special, chosen, important, and exceptional, the possibility of being unremarkable can feel like a form of psychological death. This is why narcissists struggle so much when they are no longer the center of attention. This is why they often feel threatened when someone else receives praise. This is why they may try to undermine people who outshine them. And this is why celebrating the success of others can be surprisingly difficult for them. To most people, another person's success is simply another person's success. But for the narcissist, it can feel like proof that they are losing something important. Every compliment given to someone else can feel like a compliment taken away from them. Every achievement by another person can feel like a challenge to their own value. This is especially true as they grow older. Aging can be deeply uncomfortable for many people, but it often carries a unique psychological burden for narcissists. Over time, many of the things they once relied on for validation begin to change. Physical beauty fades. Social influence shifts. Positions of power become less secure. The attention that once came naturally may begin to move toward younger, newer, and more energetic people. The very things that helped them maintain their image become harder to hold on to. And as those sources of validation begin to disappear, the emotional pain they have spent years avoiding starts to catch up with them. This is one reason some narcissists become more controlling as they age. Some become more bitter. Some become more suspicious of other people. Others become emotionally unpredictable. The reason is not always obvious from the outside, but underneath they may be struggling with the growing realization that admiration is becoming harder to secure. The world no longer responds to them the way it once did. The attention they depended on becomes less reliable. And because they never built a strong internal foundation, they have very little to fall back on. They watch younger people rise and feel envy instead of pride. They watch their influence shrink and feel panic instead of acceptance. They see the world moving forward without them and experience it as a personal threat. Beneath all of this lies the same fear that has followed them for years. The fear that if they are not extraordinary, they are nothing at all. The fifth sign is perhaps the deepest and most heartbreaking of all. It touches the central wound that exists at the core of the narcissistic personality. It is the inability to experience genuine emotional intimacy. Many narcissists have relationships. They may have romantic partners. They may have families. They may have loyal friends, followers, supporters, or admirers. From the outside, it can appear that they're surrounded by people. But being surrounded by people is not the same as being emotionally connected to them. True intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to reveal fears, insecurities, weaknesses, and emotional needs. For the narcissist, this can feel almost impossible. Allowing another person to see those hidden parts of themselves feels dangerous. It feels exposing. It feels risky. And so they keep those parts locked away. They may share stories. They may share opinions. They may even share personal experiences. But the deepest parts of themselves remain hidden behind carefully constructed defenses. As a result, they often live in a state of emotional isolation. Even when people love them. Even when people support them. Even when they are surrounded by attention. The loneliness remains. This is the kind of loneliness that attention cannot cure. It is the kind of emptiness that admiration cannot fill. It is the kind of hunger that survives every relationship. Again and again, they search for connection in ways that never truly create it. They seek control. They seek dependence. They seek admiration. They seek emotional power over others. But they rarely seek the one thing that creates real closeness, which is authentic emotional openness. Because of this, many relationships eventually leave them feeling even more empty than before. The tragedy is that what they truly need is often something their psychological defenses will not allow them to accept. Real love requires being seen. Real love requires being known. Real love requires allowing another person to witness your fears, your imperfections, and your emotional needs. But for the narcissist, this level of openness can feel unbearable. Instead of creating safety, vulnerability feels like danger. Instead of creating connection, exposure feels like humiliation. And so, they remain just outside the emotional closeness they desperately want. They spend their lives reaching toward intimacy while simultaneously protecting themselves from it. They mistake admiration for love. They mistake control for connection. They mistake possession for partnership. And when these illusions eventually fall apart, they often blame the people around them. They blame partners. They blame friends. They blame family members. They blame circumstances. Rarely do they recognize that the same pattern follows them wherever they go. The source of the problem is not always the people in their lives. The source is often the emotional barrier they carry within themselves. A locked door they are afraid to open. This is the suffering hidden beneath the arrogance. This is the pain hidden beneath the appearance of superiority. Understanding this does not excuse harmful behavior. It does not erase the damage narcissists can cause. It does not remove responsibility for their actions, but it does reveal something important. It helps you see them more clearly. It helps you understand that what appears powerful on the surface is often much more fragile underneath. It breaks the illusion that they have everything figured out. It challenges the belief that they are somehow winning at life while everyone else struggles. The truth is often very different. Many of the people who appear strongest from the outside are fighting invisible battles within themselves. And once you understand this, their power over you begins to weaken. The fear they once created starts to fade. The emotional control they once held over you becomes less effective, because you begin to see them for what they really are. Not a god, not a monster, not an unstoppable force, but a wounded human being trapped inside a psychological structure they spent years building. And when that structure begins to crack, the results can be devastating. When admiration disappears, when rejection arrives, when relationships end, when failures become impossible to ignore, when the audience leaves, when the mask can no longer be maintained, something painful begins to emerge. What appears underneath is not strength. It is often collapse. It is depression they do not fully understand. It is rage they cannot control. It is shame they cannot face. It is grief for the person they might have become, but never allowed themselves to be. This is why narcissistic collapse can be one of the most psychologically intense experiences a person can go through. It is not simply disappointment. It is not simply failure. It is the breakdown of the identity they spent a lifetime protecting. Everything they depended on begins to feel unstable. Everything they used to define themselves begins to lose its power. And suddenly they are confronted with the very feelings they spent years trying to escape. The deepest tragedy is that the thing they run from is often the very thing that could help them heal. The simple but frightening experience of being an imperfect human being, a person with flaws, a person with fears, a person with emotional needs, a person who does not have to be extraordinary in order to be worthy of love. Yet many narcissists spend their lives avoiding this truth. The more they run from it, the more trapped they become. The more they defend the false self, the further they move away from the real one. And the cost of that distance grows larger with time. If these insights help explain experiences you have had, then perhaps they also offer something valuable. They offer clarity. They offer perspective. They offer a deeper understanding of behavior that often seems confusing and contradictory. Awareness allows you to see through manipulation. Understanding allows you to respond more wisely. And both help protect you from becoming trapped in unhealthy emotional dynamics. The next time you encounter someone whose confidence feels exaggerated, whose superiority feels rehearsed, or whose need for admiration seems endless, look beneath the surface. Remember the emptiness they cannot fill. Remember the dissatisfaction they cannot escape. Remember the exhausting performance they feel compelled to maintain. Remember the fear of irrelevance that follows them. Remember the intimacy they long for, but struggle to accept. And remember that what appears powerful from the outside may actually be hiding deep vulnerability within. The greatest tragedy of the narcissist is not only the pain they cause others. As serious as that pain can be, there is another tragedy that often goes unnoticed. They spend their lives chasing an image that was never real. They defend a version of themselves that never truly belonged to them. They devote enormous energy to protecting an identity built on fear rather than authenticity, and in doing so they often miss the one thing that could have changed everything: the courage to be seen as they truly are. Not perfect, not superior,